Hey y'all, I am back with some new dinner inspiration. I'm going to be sharing 5 nights of dinners that I have recently made for my family. They were all new to us and have easily became new favorites. Every meal was seriously such a hit. Every recipe in here was simple and quick, but packed full of flavor. So I am really proud of this lineup and I'm excited to share. So let's go ahead and jump on into the first one. So on this night, I'm pulling a recipe from this super easy Pioneer Woman cookbook. I'm going to be making the cheeseburger pizza. This one stood out to me. I've been wanting to make it for a while. And y'all, I knew that this was going to be good, but I did not expect for it to be as good as it was. My husband raved about it, which I figured he would because it's combining his two favorite foods. But I'm going to start off by cooking up a pound of ground beef. While that's going, I am going to get the pizza crust ready, which if you have seen a lot of her recipes, she likes to use frozen bread dough a lot, which is super convenient. I love it. I'm using the Kroger brand, and I just let that thaw and rise overnight, so it was perfect by the time I needed it. So I'm just going to shape it into a large oval on an ungreased cookie sheet. It took very little time, very little effort. So by the time I got that done, my meat was about halfway cooked through, which is when I like to go in and season it. So I'm just seasoning it with some onion powder, salt, and pepper. She did dice up an onion and cook that in with the ground beef. So if you like that, go for that instead. But I just continued browning that, drained off the grease, and now we're going to flavor it up like a cheeseburger. So I'm adding in a 1/4 cup of ketchup, a 1/4 cup of yellow mustard. I'm going to do a little bit of some Lawry's seasoned salt, not too much because I already salted the meat, and several dashes of Worcestershire sauce because it goes so good with ground beef. Definitely gives it that classic cheeseburger flavor that I remember. But I'm going to get that stirred together really good. I'm going to let that simmer for just a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to pull that from the heat. So now we can start preparing the pizza. So I'm going to drizzle some olive oil over the dough, and I'm taking my silicone brush and just spreading that out more evenly. Definitely make sure to get the edges really well. She said to salt and pepper the dough, which I don't know if I've ever done that before, but I think that is such a genius idea. I'm definitely going to start doing that from now on. I did use garlic salt, though, instead of regular salt, since we just love that. I use it on pretty much everything. I did also shred up an 8-ounce block of some sharp cheddar cheese, so you do need 2 cups total of that for this recipe. So I'm going to do about a cup on the bottom layer. And we'll also need some shredded mozzarella cheese. You'll need about a cup total. So here I'm just doing about a 1/2 cup on the bottom because we are going to be doing another layer on top, which I love. So now I can start adding on that really delicious seasoned ground beef mixture. I started off by doing it by the spoonful, but quickly realized that would take way too long. So I definitely recommend just kind of dumping it out in the middle and just gently, spreading it out, making sure to leave a border for the crust. So here I am adding that last cup of sharp cheddar over the top, as well as the final 1/2 cup of shredded mozzarella. I'm just taking that silicone brush that already has some leftover oil on it and just going back around the crust just to ensure that these sesame seeds will stick. We're definitely going for that sesame seed bun look, which I really liked as well. I started by kind of pinching some over it like delicately, but it just wasn't enough, so I just went back around with the bottle. And that's going to go in the oven at 425 degrees for about 15 minutes, just until it's nice and golden brown on top. You could totally leave it just like this, but while it was in the oven, I did go ahead and chop up some toppings. You can add whatever toppings that you like on your cheeseburger on this. I'm only going to add it to half of the pizza because I have to keep my kids in mind. They're not going to eat it with all that stuff on top. But I added some lettuce, tomatoes, and my personal favorite was definitely the chopped dill pickles. Go so good with it. I did also fry up a few pieces of bacon, so I just crumbled that up and added it all over the top of the pizza. She did suggest that you could drizzle it with some ketchup and mustard if you wanted to. I decided not to, but I do think that would go really good with this because it definitely has more of a cheeseburger flavor than it does pizza. I just simply cut it into squares, and it was so filling. I honestly don't think that it needs any sides, but y'all, this was seriously so good. It definitely exceeded my expectations, like so flavorful, and I love that bread dough as the crust. This next meal was one that I was really looking forward to because I just knew off the bat that we were all going to love it. So this is going to be a 1-pot pork chop and rice skillet. I found this recipe on TikTok from a girl named May. I will definitely have her video linked in my description box. I highly recommend that you all go and watch it. She is another Kentucky cook, and her kind of cooking is my kind of cooking. I absolutely love her page. But yeah, this recipe really caught my attention because of one single ingredient that she used, which I'll show in just a second. Right now, I'm just seasoning the pork chops with salt, pepper, onion, and garlic powder on both sides, and soy sauce is that ingredient. I love how she added it to the pork chops and to the rice. As you can see, I'm just kind of stirring it all together, making sure that the soy sauce coats all of it. But yeah, I just loved how, it's just such a simple ingredient that most people always have in their pantry anyways, and I just would never have thought to add it in this way. So to my large skillet with high sides, I just drizzled in a little bit of oil. Mine was actually some canola oil, which I rarely ever cook with, but that's just what I chose on this night. But use whatever oil that you want to. As you can see, I've added in all of my pork chops, and I am not looking to cook these through right now. I'm just looking to create a sear. So it's on a medium-high heat, and I cooked it for about 1.5 minutes per side. You definitely don't want to overdo this step, or you're going to end up with some dry and tough pork chops. Nobody wants that. If you properly cook a pork chop, there is seriously nothing better. But now that those have the color that I want, I got those removed to a separate plate, and I got that set to the side. So to that same skillet, I'm going to add in a can of chicken broth, which is 2 cups, and 1/2 cup of water, which will help deglaze the bottom of that pan. I'm also using a flat wooden spatula to scrape up those flavorful bits. So grab you some jasmine rice. This particular one is my absolute favorite. I've measured out 1 cup, and I've got that added to my broth. I did mince up 2 large cloves of garlic, threw that in, and she used slices of onions in this step. I'm just going to do some onion powder, and again, a couple good tablespoons of that soy sauce. So I'm going to get all of that stirred together, and I'm going to wait for this to come up to a boil. Once it reaches that point, I'm going to add all of those pork chops back on in, as well as the juices that was left on that plate that came out of the pork. And I am going to cover this with a lid, and I'm going to set a timer for 25 minutes. Do not lift the lid. You don't need to. And here's what it should look like. Your rice and pork should be cooked perfectly. All of that liquid should be absorbed. And I know that this looks bland. It doesn't look exciting, but you just have to trust me on this one. It tastes absolutely incredible. As you can see, I served it with a side of roasted broccoli. And y'all, I cannot say enough good things about it. I just absolutely love the simplicity of it. And I am pretty sure this was the first time that my son, who is my youngest, has ever ate an entire pork chop by himself. So that is really saying something. I am definitely going to double this recipe the next time that I make it, just so that we can have leftovers of it. On this night, I'm going to be grilling on the Blackstone. So the first thing that I'm going to make as a side is an Italian pasta salad. So I have this box of salad rotini, which is a little bit different than the regular rotini, I noticed. I boiled up 1/2 box of that in some salted water, drained it off once it was nice and tender, and I am going to rinse it with cold water, of course, to cool it down, but it's also going to keep the pasta from just sticking and clumping up together. So I'm going to get that transferred on over to the bowl I'm going to serve it in. And I'm going to chop up some cucumbers. So these mini cucumbers are my favorite, but they are especially my favorite in this pasta salad. It's also really good with just a regular size English cucumbers, but that is what I would recommend for this. So I did wash them, of course. I'm using 3 of them, as you can see. I do like to kind of discard the ends of them, and I'm just slicing that in half lengthwise, doing it again, and then just dicing it into small little bite-sized pieces. So I'm going to get that dumped in on top of the pasta. And now I'm going to chop up some tomatoes. So I know these look a little wonky. This is just what I had left over in my fridge. So I'm just simply dicing it up like I said. You can literally throw any vegetable that you want to in here and it will turn out good. Sometimes I also add in little cheese cubes or some chopped up pepperoni or salami. That's really good as well, but This night, I just wanted it in its most simple form. I am going to season this with this Salad Supreme seasoning that goes so good with pasta salad. And then for the dressing, I'm going to use some Olive Garden Italian dressing. Any Italian dressing will work just fine, but this one, I really feel like gives it a little extra something something. But that is it for the ingredients. Like, so good. I'm going to cover this up and let it sit in the fridge. The longer it sits, the better it tastes. But this is a very common summer side dish where I live. It's definitely one of my favorites. So I'm going to make a honey buffalo garlic sauce to go over some chicken. So as always, I will have this recipe linked in my description box if you want the exact measurements, but I'm just using up the last of all three of those ingredients. So finish off my buffalo sauce. I was so glad to finish off the rest of that honey. I've had it for a while and it keeps on crystallizing. It's driving me nuts. So I was glad to get rid of it. And then I just used the last of my jarred minced garlic. So I'm going to stir that together really good, making sure to break up that honey. And I'm going to be using some boneless, skinless chicken thighs for this. I did transfer that to just a small casserole dish, simply just to make it easier to transport outside for when I go to grill it. But I'm just seasoning it with some salt, pepper, and some dried parsley. So I'm just going to get all of those turned over so that I can season the other side the same way. You can definitely add more seasonings if you want to, but I don't think it's necessary because you got to remember that sauce that I just made is super flavorful. So I'm going to add a few tablespoons of that sauce over the chicken. I was really careful to make sure that spoon didn't touch the raw chicken because we're going to come back to it once the chicken is almost done to baste it over both sides of it. So yeah, I'm just stirring it all around, making sure that sauce is coating all of the chicken. And now we're going to take it outside. So I'm going to go ahead and warn y'all, this outside footage is terrible. I can't stand it. The lighting is awful. The shadows are driving me crazy. So I cut a lot out. We are supposed to get a roof put on our porch really soon. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to help with the quality of the Blackstone videos, and I really do love cooking on it, love making recipes on it, and I want to show more of that. So hopefully that will solve the problem. But anyways, I have my grill on a low heat. I drizzled on some canola oil, laid down those chicken thighs. On the other side, same thing. Laid down some oil, added my washed and trimmed asparagus, and I seasoned it with some Kinder's buttery steakhouse seasoning. And I'm just going to go in and toss it every few minutes so it doesn't burn, and I'm just going to cook that until it's tender. So after a few minutes, I'm going to come in and flip my chicken on over. Like I said, you definitely want to cook it on a low temperature, low and slow. That way the chicken doesn't burn, but it stays, nice and juicy. I love the color on it. Like I said, once it was almost done, I am going to finish it off with the rest of that honey buffalo sauce. I did do this to both sides, but I'm just showing it on one side. But remember, that honey is like pure sugar, so it's definitely going to caramelize, and it's going to give it a burnt look, but I promise you it tastes so, so good. So both of those are done. I'm going to go back in the house to plate it up. So I have 2 of those chicken thighs, a good amount of the asparagus, and a big spoonful of that pasta salad. This was a really beautiful hot day, and this pasta salad just hits every single time. It's so good. I really like the asparagus because I'm used to normally just steaming it, so I really love that grilled flavor with that seasoning. And y'all, these chicken thighs, so delicious. They were cooked perfectly, so nice and juicy, and that honey buffalo sauce is everything. Like, my family cannot handle a lot of spice, so it was just the perfect amount, and it paired so good with that honey. We always love a good sweet and salty combo, and then of course the garlic. Like, so very easy to make, and just, it was incredible. I most definitely will be making it again. Highly, highly recommend it, guys. On this night, I'm going to be making a 1-pot taco pasta. So I'm going to start by shredding this 8-ounce block of Monterey Jack cheese. And I'm also going to cube up about 4 ounces of this great value version of Velveeta cheese. The recipe does state to do this first. That way it can be closer to room temperature. And also, she used a cup of sharp cheddar and a cup of the Monterey. I didn't want to do that, so I just used all Monterey Jack. Also, same thing with the milk, which honestly I was out of milk, so I had to use a half a cup of heavy cream and a half a cup of water, and it worked just fine. So to my Dutch oven, I'm going to brown up a pound of ground beef. Mine was still half frozen. I'm sure we have all been there, but it's truly not a big deal. It still cooks down pretty fast. And per usual, we're going to brown it and drain the grease. So now I'm going to add in a couple tablespoons of butter. I also minced up a few cloves of garlic. So I'm just adding that on into the pot, and I'm going to cook that in with the ground beef and the butter for just a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to add in a full package of taco seasoning. I'm going to give that a really good stir, make sure all that beef is perfectly coated in it. And now I'm going to add in the milk, and the recipe called for 2 cups of beef broth. Didn't have it, had to improvise again. So I did 2 cups of water and 2 teaspoons of this handy dandy beef powder. Boom, we got beef broth. I added a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce and 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. If I was thinking, I would have added in the tomato paste with the ground beef and taco seasoning, but it's all good. Still worked out in the end. And then I added in 1 can of some mild rotel juice and all. So now you're going to need to grab some pasta. The recipe uses shelled pasta, but I didn't have any. So I'm using this wagon wheeled one, which is super fun. Definitely a nice little trick for picky eaters as well, because my son didn't want nothing to do with this until I told him that I use Hot Wheels pasta, and then he was all about it. So I used half of that box of the pasta, covered it with a lid. You definitely want to come in and stir it every few minutes, or else it'll stick horribly to the bottom, especially in a Dutch oven. But I have learned with one pot pastas that it always takes longer to cook than what the box says. So definitely keep on giving it a try until it's nice and tender before you continue on with the recipe. So at this point, I have turned off my heat. These Dutch ovens hold heat really well. And I added in all of my cheeses, and I just kept on stirring until it all melted. And at that point, it is done. As this cools down, it will definitely thicken. But you guys, this recipe seriously impressed me. This was one of those nights where I didn't know what to cook. I didn't want to go to the store. Nothing sounded good. So I went to Pinterest, and I've had this one pan for a long time, and it just never sounded that great to me. I only picked it because I had everything on hand to make it. But I thought that it was going to be like a taco meat mixed with mac and cheese, but it is not like that at all. It definitely tastes more unique than that. Definitely tastes more fancy. Like, I would be proud to serve this to anyone. It just blew my mind, and we all loved it, especially my kids. They cleaned their bowls, and I served it with some garlic Texas toast. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to make some chicken Caesar sandwiches. So I'm going to be doing that on some ciabatta rolls. So I'm just going to get those split open, and then I'm going to spread on some softened butter because I am going to be toasting those up in a hot skillet over there to the left. We have been on a huge sandwich kick lately, and for us anyways, baseball and softball season has started. So we are at the ball field most nights of the week. So I have really been on the lookout for just really easy things to prepare. So, you know, toasting up your bread like this definitely elevates a sandwich, as well as this Lighthouse Caesar dressing. This is my personal favorite Caesar dressing, and it's going to add a lot of flavor to this sandwich and just, you know, a little bit different than your typical mayo. So I'm going to get that spread out, and I'm going to layer on some boar's head deli chicken. You can even use like shredded rotisserie chicken or just leftover chicken from a recipe. Doesn't matter. I'm going to lay down a slice of Kobe cheese, as well as a couple thin slices of tomato that I'm going to season with some garlic salt and black pepper. I'm also going to add on a piece of lettuce, and that is it. It doesn't get any easier than that. That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to serve it with some potato salad that I made up earlier that morning. It's just some russet potatoes, chopped boiled eggs, chopped dill pickles, mayo, mustard, salt, pepper, onion, and garlic powder, and some paprika. If you want to see me make that the next time I do, I can definitely film that, but it's definitely another one of our favorite summer side dishes. This meal was so good, so quick, and that is going to wrap up this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that it inspired you. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.